The Chargers have a long lineage of undrafted free agents who have been able to make their way onto the active roster, and I don't think that 2024 is going to be any different, and there's a couple we're talking about today that definitely fit what Jim Harbaugh wants to do.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 8 seasons, but this is our 6th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. We might have to bump that up here another year pretty quick. I know we started in May, but thank you guys, as always, to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. And to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Today, Daniel, we are going to get into our undrafted free agent chronicles here. We're going to get into 3 players, and we're going to talk about how they could possibly forge their path to making this Chargers 53-man roster.
I guess we can just label it UDFA Monday. Since the draft is over, we wanted to be able to get our eyes on some of these guys before we talked about them. So we picked a few of them that could make a lot of sense at positions of need for the Chargers. But today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. David, today we're going to talk about these guys kind of in order of how much we like them, because we didn't know how much we would like them before we watched them, but we want to make sure that we get to watch a decent amount of all these guys before we talk about their chances of making this roster. And one of the guys I think that just screams Jim Harbaugh football also plays at a position I think you could say the Chargers have a need at tight end, as far as turning this into a tight end room that Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh want. And so Zach Heins was a guy that we wanted to watch today and did, the tight end from South Dakota State, who looks the part at 6'6", 260, definitely feels like a Harbaugh guy, David. Like, I think there's a definite chance and a path for this guy to make the roster.
Yeah, no question about it. I think when you look at this guy, he has that prototypical size that I think that Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz are looking for out of the tight end position. And I feel like, he could definitely make this team and if he does make this team, it's because he's a better blocker to me than fullback / tight end Ben Mason, who I think is probably going to be his primary competition.
Yeah, as far as like the path for him making the roster, I think it looks like this. I mean, it just feels like the tight end position behind Hayden Hurst and Will Dissly is wide open.
Yeah.
Will they keep 3 or 4 tight ends? That's the part we don't know. But Donald Parham and Stone Smart are not really inline tight ends. We don't know how much they're going to want to split tight ends off or need those kind of pure receiving options. But Hayden Hurst also fills that role. So maybe they want to go with more of a receiving option. Maybe they want to keep a Donald Parham around because they only have really Hayden Hurst that fills that exact role. But if they want another physical blocking tight end guy and they think of Ben Mason even as like a fullback, and let's be honest, Ben Mason didn't always stick around even when the Ravens had him. He bounced around a lot, right? Then.
Yeah.
So if he's going for a kind of fullback spot, then the tight end position kind of feels wide open. They didn't draft one, right? So there's no prohibitive favorite there. And this guy just feels like a Jim Harbaugh type of player, right? And the first of the pros that I have here is just a grown man at the line of scrimmage. It's funny because I remember we were watching last year Tucker Kraft. It's like one of the most athletic, tight ends that came out last year, ended up with the Packers. But when I watched him, I kept seeing this number 87 dude. And I was like, well, think about Tucker Kraft. He's the second best blocker on his own team.
Yeah.
Right? And it makes sense because, I mean, with Zach Heins, he's 6'6", 260 pounds, almost 33-inch arms, which is great. And routinely overpowered defenders at the point of attack. And I think the other thing you like there, David, outside of the run blocking, which I think he would give a huge boost, it might be the second best blocker immediately behind Will Dissly, and also feels like he would fit like a Will Dissly backup role, right?
Sure.
Definitely. Is he was a nice red zone threat as well, right? The legitimate red zone threat in his time there. So even though he's not a great, super athletic receiver, has some soft hands and some things to like in that regard as well.
Yeah, I mean, he caught 7 touchdowns his last season in college football. So, and most of them, I would say, were in that red zone area for sure.
Yeah.
Strong but soft hands is the first note that I have, so I co-sign with that. I feel like he delivers a good initial punch and pass protection. He's a high effort blocker for sure. He blocks to the whistle. He doesn't lose many one-on-one blocks at the line of scrimmage. I mean, he just doesn't.
Yeah, he doesn't.
I
And
feel
that's
like
with blocking like edge rushers and defensive ends and stuff like that a lot of times too.
Big guys that are his size or bigger, and he's doing a great job of handling them one-on-one. Also feels like he always is looking for someone to block. Even when a teammate is catching a pass in front of him or behind him, he's always looking for somebody to try to remove from that play to open up extra yardage for that guy on his football team.
Yeah, and also let's put some respect on his name. Back-to-back FCS champion, right, with South Dakota State.
Absolutely.
Some like Easton Stick type of stuff right there. And I think the other thing, too, like we said, as a receiver, is going to be a red zone threat for sure just because of his big frame, his ability to kind of box out defenders. He's not going to shake a bunch of guys loose.
No.
But if you're going misdirection, if you're going kind of fake blocking and then running a route, he's a guy that can do a lot of that. Not only 7 touchdowns last season, but 17 touchdowns over the last 3 years.
Yeah, so
right?
some real production there, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, 2 of those years he had Tucker Kraft on his team, right? So, I mean, he was, had a legitimate competition there. And I remember like just watching him and just thinking like, yeah, this guy fits. This guy looks like what you think this offense wants. The guys that do this, guys you don't want to play against. This is a guy that checks those boxes.
Yeah, this is not a small guy, right? This isn't a Stone Smart. This isn't a Donald Barham who's just a receiving threat.
Yeah.
This is a guy who is going to take your lunch money, right? He's a mean son of a gun. He's a
it's
large
funny too
human.
that we can get this excited about blocking tight ends because we watched such poor blocking at that position for so long and
for
saw
a very
how much,
long time.
How detrimental it was to the Chargers running game for such big portions of the last few seasons. So if you're looking at the cons for him as a player, obviously he didn't get drafted. There's a reason he ended up outside of the draft. What did you have?
Yeah, so for me, I think when it comes to like climbing to the second level, I feel like he needed to get more accurate and like find his landmarks.
Needs to hit at a higher clip.
Sure. He missed too many of his second level blocks, which, if you want to turn those, 5 to 7 yard runs into 10 to 15 yard runs, you got to have your second level or your climbing blocks be more accurate. So that's something that's definitely important. Obviously, he needs to add more to his route running chops. I mean, he has soft hands. Like you said, he is able to box out defenders, but I feel like he probably rounds off his routes a little bit. He doesn't have like the quickest movements. I mean, obviously he's a large guy, but he needs to be a little bit more precise. And he could be a little bit quicker off the line of scrimmage. I think, obviously, most of the parts of the receiving aspect of the game, I think, can all be worked on here for Mr. Zach Heins.
Yeah, I mean, I would just put it simply as like the dude's just kind of athletically challenged, right?
Yeah.
Which is like, hey, if you're in the red zone and you're just trying to box out a 5'10", 186-pound nickel defender,
he's going to do that all day.
Fine,
Yeah.
And you misdirection, things like that, he's fine. But if you're going to ask him to kind of outrun people or work the seam or things like that, it's just not what his game is. I mean, part of the reason you have to think he went undrafted is because he ran a 5.0 flat 40 time, right? Which
Yikes.
Now you have so many. I mean, there's probably 12 plus people in this draft that were drafted at tight end that run in the 4.6s. Like 4.6 is kind of the new normal. This dude's running a 5.0, which is something I can say I've done in my lifetime. So you're talking about athletically gifted. I mean, that's not really what his game is. And I think that's part of what kind of hurts him at the second level is just hitting those landmarks. He's not super athletic. He's not super explosive. True. If you're asking him to, reach block a weak side linebacker on the other side, it's probably going to be hard for him. So you kind of have to know what you're getting into there. Also a little bit of an older player, 24 coming out, 6th year senior dude, right? I also needs to hit at a higher clip when he's on the move. Athletic limitations show up at the second level at times. Not a burner. Stiff route running. Also, you could say clunky route running.
Definitely.
Doesn't bring much besides just being a big player after the catch, right? Like he is hard to bring down. He's not turning it into much. Yeah. He might drag a couple guys for a yard or two.
He's not shaking nobody.
No, but I just think that it's like, what you're getting. He might be a specialist, right? But specialists have chances to make the team.
I mean, look at Will Disley. I mean, he's a specialist.
Yeah, and I think this is also a dude you could see being on like the punt team, right?
Oh,
the field goal
definitely.
Team, like all those things.
A core 4 guy I could see for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want him, sprinting down the field on punt teams, but I think you want him in there to at least make sure your punt doesn't get blocked, right?
Punt blocks,
yeah, stuff like that. So I really liked him. I saw him, and he was the guy we both liked most out of the 3 guys we're talking about today. And he just is a guy that feels like he helps your team become a little bit tougher, a little bit more hard-nosed, a little bit more like a Jim Harbaugh type of a team. And another guy that would probably do that, is a guy who played for Michigan, which is who we're going to be talking about next, Carson Barnhart, the guy we like second most out of the undrafted free agents, and another guy where it's pretty easy to see the path for him making this roster because, I mean, not only does he have a good relationship with the coaching staff, and they obviously know a lot about him, but he's a guy that brings a lot of versatility and I think a lot of things that this coaching staff would really appreciate. So we're going to talk about him and much more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. It's one of the best deals they have all year long. Definitely good when you can lose and still get $150 in bonus bets. But if you guys want to get on the NBA action tonight, one way to really spice things up in a non-football sport is to go with some action, and they have popular parlays, including tonight's for the T-Wolves Nuggets game, where you can get Nikola Jokic to score 30-plus and Anthony Edwards to score 30-plus, along with Rudy Gobert getting 10-plus rebounds. And if Mike Conley also makes 3-plus three-pointers, you get that at plus 979. That's almost 10-1 odds. All those things feel somewhat attainable. But everything you can bet on in this app is great, from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks. You can do it all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, David, let's get to our second undrafted free agent profile here. And we want to kind of, get to watch all of these guys, like I said. Yeah, I don't like ever talking about someone extensively without being able to actually see it. So we wanted to do this just like we did with the Chargers draft picks, where we find 3 or 4 games, right? And we get to watch them all and get a good read on them. So that's what we did with Carson Barnhart, who is a guard/tackle, more of a guard at this level. You would think that's what he was projected by pretty much all the draft analysts. But he played at the University of Michigan and was a big part of a really, really stellar offensive line for them on their national championship run. And David, when we're talking about these guys, obviously you have to look at the position and why they have a chance to make the roster. And I think when you look at what the Chargers have on the interior, it feels like there's going to be some open spots there to compete for.
Absolutely. I feel like his pathway to making this roster, it goes through beating Brendan Hymas or Jordan McFadden as your primary backups to your interior offensive line, right? To your Jamar Sawyer or your Zion Johnson. Or, I mean, if somebody beats one of those guys out, obviously they're going to, fall back to that position. But I feel like, this is just a move to add more quality competition to that interior offensive line room.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think when you saw the Chargers not go out and draft interior offensive linemen, it kind of rang to me like, are we sure that these guys should be going out there with no legitimate competition to push these guys for a roster spot after both Zion Johnson and Jamar Sawyer really struggled last year?
Yeah.
Jordan McFadden, a super unknown commodity at this point.
Yeah.
Could potentially be also vying for the backup center job. So that's like the one thing with Carson Barnhart, we'll kind of get to a con early, is like, if he played center, that would probably boost his chances a little bit.
Oh,
right?
definitely.
If he had some, because besides that, he played everywhere else. As far as, how he can make the team, he can make the team if the Chargers really want and value the versatility that he could bring to the table, right? Former Michigan player, obviously, but also gives them some positional flexibility, at least as far as the experience he has. 16 starts at right tackle, 9 at left tackle, 3 at right guard, 2 at left guard. So not only have you seen him play 4 of the 5 positions on the offensive line, you've seen him play on both sides. So there's no kind of, Joe Alt situation. Can he work on the right side? Does it work well? Even with Zion Johnson, right? He switched sides his rookie year, and they felt the need to move him back to the left side in his second year because that's where he played and felt more comfortable. Karsen Barnhart's played everywhere. You've seen him on both sides. And I think if you're talking about the pros, you've got to see him play some guard, which I think is good, even though it wasn't a lot. He played guard last year, the final 3 games through their college football championship run. So that was nice. You got to watch him against Alabama. Definitely looked like that's where he fit best and didn't seem to struggle doing that at all. And I think he's exactly what you want in a backup, right? Zach Zinter, a guy who got drafted, went down. They plugged this dude in, and they were still able to run their offense. They still were able to have a national championship level offense with this dude moving from right tackle to right guard, and they just never really skipped a beat, right? I think there's a lot of things he does well, but I think that's one of the things they're going to value for sure.
Oh, yeah. Versatility is huge with offensive linemen. The more positions that you can play, the more value you bring to the table. I mean, injuries happen on the offensive line all the time, Daniel. We see it, right? We see it every single year. players go down. So
yeah, and you don't want that guy who fills in for them to totally nuke everything you have going on.
Exactly.
And he showed he could do that. Yeah.
Right. You want him to step in and not miss a beat, which is what you said exactly happened at Michigan. Carson Barnhart here, 6'4", 306 pounds. He doesn't quit on the plays. Even when he misses blocks upfield initially, he's able to recover and he's able to finish there. He's got a mean streak. He definitely has that mean streak that you're looking for, especially if you want him to be playing on the interior. He's looking to knock somebody over. I mean, he's always looking to do that. I feel like he does a good job of controlling rushers' hands. Which you're going to do a lot of hand fighting, when you're in pass protection, especially against these more advanced pass rushers you're going to see. Also has the power to turn defenders out of the hole. I saw him do that many, many times. I mean, not incredible power, but enough grip strength to be able to turn defenders out of the way to allow your running backs to flow through the hole.
Yeah, I agree on all of those parts. I thought he handled stunts really well. He also did the thing where he went one-handed and was blocking someone. I'm like, hey, I got this guy here, but if another guy comes, I still have a free hand.
Yeah.
Which probably isn't good technique, but it looked really cool, and that was something I definitely had. Yeah, it never came back to bite him in the games that I saw, but he's like, yeah, I can take another one. If you guys have someone else for me to block, I can do that too. I thought he also had a really good hit rate as a puller. When he was playing guard, when he was pulling, he found his block and opened things up. Dane Brugler brought it up, and we got to watch it in the Alabama game.
Yeah.
The go-ahead touchdown in the overtime was because of him pulling, sealing the block, and it led to a big chunk run that ended up basically winning Michigan that game against Alabama. So that was awesome to see. Finds a way to turn defenders like you talked about. Good on combo blocks. Very just fundamentally sound in pass protection.
Yeah.
Just doesn't look surprised. Doesn't look off balance a lot of times. His anchor... a little shaky at times, but it always held up. He got pushed into the, close to the quarterback a couple times, but he always kind of found a way.
I felt like he made some good adjustments too in pass protection at times.
Yeah, he did. I mean, and I think he's just, also started on 2 Joe Moore award-winning offensive lines for the best offensive line in college football. So if we're talking about the cons, David, I'd say, mostly played tackle during his collegiate career. I wish we could have saw a little bit more of, him playing guard.
Yeah.
Doesn't have the brute strength to be a road grader. Right, the anchor obviously got him pushed back into the quarterback's lap a couple of times, and I think we'll get tested more on the inside than it did on the outside. So that'll be kind of interesting to see. And also the thing me and you talked about, positional versatility is nice, but you definitely want this guy on the inside. Could he hold that for, could he finish a game at tackle if you needed him to? Yeah, he probably could, especially if you're not going up against, certain types of edge rushers. But he's mostly going to be a guard, even though he brought that positional versatility in college.
Certain types of edge rushers is the correct way to phrase that, because he does not handle speed well at all.
On the outside.
We watched, on the outside when he was playing tackle. We watched him against Penn State when he was, trying to block
Chop Robinson a first
Chop Robinson, and it was ugly. Chop Robinson blew past him multiple times and really made life a living hell for J.J. McCarthy. It was not a pretty sight. So if you are going to have him play tackle for you, you might as well have that extra blocker on that side, that extra tight end, or that running back on that side to help him out, because he's going to need it. Okay. Also, he needs to work on getting off the ball faster, off the snap. And he definitely profiles better as a guard because of the limitations with, dealing with speed. If he's on the inside where he has help on both sides of him, I feel much more comfortable with how he profiles at the NFL level. The versatility is nice, but the tackle position isn't really where you want him to be at. You put him on the inside, I feel like he can do some good things for you.
Yeah, and like we also talked about, right? Same thing was said about Jamari Sawyer, right?
Yeah.
And Jamari Sawyer played on a national championship left tackle. So did this dude. Was playing left tackle for the national champion Michigan Wolverines last year. So it kind of reminded me of Brendan Hymus coming out a lot, where it just never really translated and didn't really work well. But he's just really solid. The word I kept kind of going back to when I was watching him was just a really solid player who does his job, has the toughness required to be on a Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman offense. So I really liked what I saw. It would not surprise me if this dude gave a real run at one of these backup interior offensive line spots.
Oh, yeah.
Will we see him play center? I don't know. But, we're just rooting for a kid from Paw Paw, Michigan to find his way onto the roster. And I had that as a pro, too. If you're from Paw Paw, Michigan, I like my linemen to be like Midwestern from a small town with one stoplight, just
check
pitching bales of hay. And I don't think he did. I don't think his family grew up on a farm or anything. But when I imagine
wouldn't be surprised.
When I imagine him, that's why I imagine just him out there, carrying barrels around and stuff like that. Paw.
Corn-fed boy.
Paw. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to like there. And there's a couple other, I think, interior offensive linemen on the undrafted free agent side that could give him a run for his money, like Willis Patrick, right, and other guys. So it'll be nice when we get to kind of compare those guys together. But Carson Barnhart, I think there's really a lot to like there. I wish there was more to like about the next guy we're going to talk about. And I think there's been a lot of people out there. Akeem Dent, huge undrafted free agent signing. This is the guy I thought was going to lead the show today. But there's part of me that just doesn't see it, and I think it's more of a project than maybe some people think he is. So I think his pathway to the roster might be a little bit more unconventional. So we're going to talk about that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff in this game to talk about. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. That's what me and my wife usually do until we want to turn on each other, and then I have to steal from her bank vault. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's just so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini-games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine, and there's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover on Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now free on the Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, David. Well, there's one more guy we want to talk about here. I think a guy that, both of us really wanted to like. And there are parts of his game that we do like. And I don't want to get that confused, And, hey, we're pulling for this dude just as much as we are for some of the other guys. But It's because he plays at a position at safety where you feel like there's a really, really good opportunity for someone to push for a roster spot here, right? Unless we see veterans added, right, which they haven't been. It's really, really unclear behind the two starters in Alohi Gilman and Derwin James. But I do want to make sure everyone is checking out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 live stream, the only thing of its kind, the only 24-hour live sports streaming show that is going on right now on Locked On Sports Today, where you get every sport covered 24/7, all day, every day, only getting the expertise that local people can provide that cover their teams every single day. So make sure you guys go check that out. But let's talk about Akeem Dent, David. It was harder for me to find the pathway to the roster, but I think if you're just talking about safety in general, that is the argument here. There is no sure thing after your two starters on this roster right now at safety.
That's exactly where I was going with it, Daniel, obviously you feel great about Derwin James and Alohi Gilman, but behind that, there's just a ton of uncertainty. You just don't know, who's going to be able to bring what to the table. Is it AJ Finley? Obviously, there's just not a lot there. All the other guys just haven't shown you enough to make you feel comfortable about
JT Woods.
JT
Woods leap.
Yeah. I want to see it. I really do. I really do. But I just don't. You can't expect that at this point in time. So I wanted Akeem Dent to be a guy that I felt good about potentially stepping up and taking that spot.
Yeah, and we want to find a path for each of these guys to make the roster, right, as we do these undrafted free agent profiles, which for the wide receivers, which we'll probably keep to the end, is going to be incredibly hard, especially if they add another veteran like MVS, which is out there, and what we're going to talk about tomorrow when we get into our Chargers buy or sells. But, to me, the path for this guy making the team is pretty simple, even if it's unconventional. Make Ryan Ficken love you. That's it, right? The best way he can make the team is just becoming a special teams demon and give himself a chance to kind of build into some potential defensive snaps down the road. And I think if you're looking for, why the Chargers made this move, to me, it's about betting on traits, right? Betting on traits and attitude, because I think the traits and the attitude both match up with something you would want to add to this team. A guy who's not afraid to come downhill and run support and get involved. And also a dude who had an 8.67 RAS score, ran a 4.45 40, and obviously has some twitch and athletic ability that you would like to see in your safety, right? So I think those are the biggest pros as far as why this dude is being brought in to try to make this team.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, good speed there. You have some versatility. You played free safety and strong safety. Showed
corner,
some good
yeah.
instincts in run support when he was in the box. I feel like that's where he did his best work in run support. He was able to fly over the edge and kind of knife in and grab the running back and drag him down. Sometimes he showed some good form wrap up tackling, but it was only sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I mean, he did have some splash plays. It's just too far, between them. Like
too few and far between. Yeah.
I mean, it's just one of those things where like one of the cons I guess I had was just like he almost made a lot of good plays, right? There was a lot of almost good plays there. I mean, I think in coverage, this is from Pro Football Focus, and I think there's definitely some ability there. Allowed only 27 yards all of last season in 235 coverage snaps, right? So I don't think he was tested or targeted a ton.
No.
But that's a great stat if you're talking about why you'd want him on the team, right? Positional versatility, he played corner, he played nickel, he played safety at Florida State. I actually kind of think I see him more as a slot. I think, when he was man-to-man on guys, I actually liked him. Very physical player, could break in front of plays in front of him when things were really laid out for him. I thought as far as cons, like the play recognition was just a little bit slow.
Yeah, it was just a little late. Yeah.
It just felt like he got caught flat-footed a few times, right, where he had to kind of play catch-up there, which is pretty fast, which is nice. Like I said, a lot of almost good plays on tape. The reckless abandon when coming downhill. He gets downhill quickly, David. I think the one thing that led to him, probably the number one thing on both of our cons lists, is just missed tackles, man. Like, I kept watching more and more games to try to find, why I could, something to plant my flag in as far as, what makes this dude great. But man, it's just every game missed tackles. Like I probably saw 8 or 9 missed tackles in the, 5 games that I watched of him. So I think to me, that's the biggest roadblock between him and making this roster.
Yeah, also I thought he was a little over-aggressive at times. He got flagged a couple of times for unnecessary roughness, which you never like to see that. I like aggressive players, but you got to be smart with it. I mean, a couple of times where the play was clearly already over and he was still trying to, wrestle a guy down to the ground. You got to be smarter than that. You can't get a 15-yard penalty for those types of situations. The ankle tackles, the missed tackles were the most frustrating part of watching Akeem Dent. There's just way too many of those instances. And, you got to wrap up a lot more effectively because at the NFL level, they'll run through ankle tackles all day long, every single day. So you absolutely have to be a formed tackler. He reads things a little bit too late, and also the ball skills are definitely a little bit lacking. Only one career interception, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, he had, several pass breakups and stuff like that. But,
18 passes defensed.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good number. He played a long time, so, not as impressive. But I think for him, all of those things, the bad angles getting downhill, it's kind of like we talked about before. It's nice that he wants to go up and make plays. But, with JT Woods, it was, he led the country in interceptions coming out the year the Chargers drafted him. And the big thing with him was just, so many missed tackles. It's a lot of similarities there, and it's just we're still waiting on JT Woods to learn how to tackle, right? Or to show the ability to tackle. Obviously, he knows how. And that's one of the reasons, you would make for a safety to make this team, right? Is because you just are so unsure about someone like JT Woods. And if JT Woods is a fit for what Jesse Minter and what Jim Harbaugh are trying to do with this team, because they don't think about him as an overly physical player, and everyone can have their role, but it's it feels like it's wide open, So maybe Thomas Harper is someone that makes us feel a little bit better about this position, even though he played a lot of slot. Maybe Jalen Phillips, the Clemson safety they brought in, is someone that we could like and, think that could make a push for a safety spot. I don't see it right now with Akeem Dent. And I think the hard thing is you can't really show you can tackle until the preseason, right? You can't tackle fully at training camp. Even when you do the joint practices, it's not full tackling. And that's what you need to see from him. So I don't know if we'll even be able to see in training camp unless, he's getting an interception every day, kind of out of character. But I don't know. I wanted to like him more than I did. Out of the 3 guys we're talking about today, he's the guy I think that has the hardest chance somehow to make the roster, even though he plays at a position you'd think would have the best. But I want to continue doing these undrafted free agent Mondays and getting into all the guys we think have the best chances. And I think there's a couple guys we talked about today that are going to really make a run at a roster spot on this team, on a team that feels like there's going to be some competitions for some spots, especially at Freudian slip there, especially at wide receiver, because if the Chargers really bring in MVS, it's like, who's safe? Is Josh Palmer safe? Is Quentin Johnston safe after his bad rookie season? I don't know. And they're making us question a lot of things. So we're going to talk about that in tomorrow's Chargers buy or sell, because if they bring in Chark and also MVS and also drafted 3 wide receivers, what does that mean for this
something's
team?
got to give.
And for these incumbent players, Darius Davis included in that, right? So we make sure you guys are back here tomorrow, and to make sure you are, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding it every day on all of our social media. You can find it on Twitter at Locked On LAC, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. You can also find it on both me and David's Twitter. You can find me at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogemeyer at Dro Talk ST. So let us know in the comments or on an Apple Podcast review if you're listening on the podcast with UDFAs that you like the most and you want us to watch for the next UDFA Monday, and what you think of the guys we talked about today, because we always appreciate your guys' input. But make sure you guys are back here tomorrow for Chargers buy or sell. The Chargers being interested in Marquez Valdez-Scantling even after bringing in DJ Chark and much more. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.